Please rise for the Lord Speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you. This is a really, truly great occasion. I think it's only the 6th time in the history of this chamber that people who are not members of the House have been asked to come in here and to debate. So it is a big first for us. It's also a big first that we're going to have an intergenerational debate. That is, members of the University of the Third Age and students will debate together. And I really, really look forward to hearing what your views are and indeed what conclusions you will come to. Dan Collett for the Third Sector.
My Lord Speaker, fellow students and members of the U3A, Banbury Academy is today proposing the premise that the third sector should be the ones to provide the main support to the vulnerable in our society. First of all, let me explain what we mean by the third sector. It encompasses religions, charities and voluntary groups, covered by Charity Commission rules and guidelines. We also need to say who we consider as being we also need to consider who we mean as being vulnerable in our society. It is those who are in the dawn of life, so the children, those who are in the twilight of life, so the elderly, and those who are in the shadows of life, the disabled, the homeless, the infirm, and those who suffer from addiction. We firmly believe that their needs are best served by organisations which are free from political motivation and aren't as close as families who are maybe unduly influenced by emotional issues. The third sector can take a balanced view that encompasses both the state and the family concerns for dealing with the vulnerable, to achieve the best results for those most vulnerable of our citizens. The third sector are not there to make a profit for their shareholders, although of course they do need to balance their books. They need to do this to remain effective organisations and to be able to work effectively within our communities. They are free to direct their spending to where it is needed most and where it will produce the best results for those most vulnerable. Charities are far more likely to know the problem at grassroots level and have people working for them who often have been through issues themselves that reflect those who they're helping. A charitable trust has been pioneering a scheme for several years where offenders who have been in prison for less than 12 months are met by a mentor to help them through that vulnerable time when they can easily reoffend. The Justice Secretary is now saying that he wants more to be met at the prison gates by a mentor. This trust aims to break the cycle of reoffending, of committing crimes and disadvantage, and create a much safer community for all of us. Another point I would like to raise, and was sort of raised by the family side, is the standard of care provided by the third sector and by state facilities. I saw on TV a while ago a documentary on the state care systems and was appalled at how shockingly low the standards were in these care homes for both people suffering physical and mental difficulties and the elderly. People were being abused and ignored when they needed help the most. The fact that they were vulnerable and unable to stand up for themselves make this all the more abhorrent and cruel. People were being pinned to the floor, physically and emotionally abused, and completely and utterly humiliated. Now just ask yourselves, would you be happy living or having a loved one live in conditions like this? Because I know I wouldn't. The reason the third sector provides a better standard of care is because workers acknowledge, understand, and help with problems these vulnerable people may have. My fellow speakers will add arguments to convince you of the importance of the third sector in providing that much needed support to the vulnerable in our society. I therefore urge you to vote for the third sector. Thank you very much.
Megan Bristow for the third sector again, please.
Lord Speaker, fellow students and members of the U3A, my colleague has addressed the political and financial aspects that make the third sector a favoured option to provide the care that a vulnerable person needs. But I will be addressing the social aspects of the value of the third sector in providing care for the vulnerable in our society. First, the third sector is very largely made up of individuals and groups who have first-hand experience of vulnerability. Charities are often created by family members of those who are currently suffering or who have suffered with or from a disease or a disability. There are also both long-established and new not-for-profit organisations that have seen problems in the community and have responded by action. Some of our oldest charities came into being before any government even realised these vulnerable people existed. Abused children or older people without shelter did not always have families to provide care for them, and those with families were still not provided with the care they needed. Often working in specific areas, such organisations are able to offer emotional support and an understanding of issues that come from experience. Moreover, their years of practical experience mean that they have expertise that is difficult for a governmental body to acquire. Secondly, in these days when vulnerable groups are often subject to prejudice, the third sector, with its direct and often personal experience, is in a powerful position to inform the public and to interpret the realities of the vulnerable people they represent. This is valuable in helping to break down many widely accepted stereotypes, particularly those involving the disabled, the unemployed, the homeless, substance abusers, the elderly, and ex-offenders, all of whom are vulnerable in some way or other. Such stereotypes fuel prejudice and reduce society's readiness to help. The support and empathy that the third sector expresses demonstrates that its representatives are both knowledgeable and approachable. Someone needing their help is much more likely to receive more objective guidance than that available from the family, and such a person would feel more free to talk about fears which he or she may have that might upset their family. In addition, when any face-to-face contact is with a volunteer, the vulnerable person or family member is greeted with enthusiasm and encouragement, and people employed by charities are also much more likely to share the same beliefs and therefore be more committed to the work than someone who's in it just for the money. These are just some of the social aspects of the third sector in providing care for the vulnerable in our society, and because of them, I urge you to vote for the third sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for really excellent speeches. Doreen Rain, Banbury U3A.
Lord Speaker, I'd like to expand one aspect of the values of the third sector already mentioned by my young colleagues. Due to their closer relationship with their clients and hence availability of first-hand experience of issues involved, third sector organisations are well placed both to educate and, my main point here, and to promulgate preventive action in areas of vulnerability such as health, childhood, ageing and behaviour. Moreover, preventive action in one area can even have effects on the very vulnerable in other areas. To give just one example, I have heard that one ex-offender has formed a charity focusing on changing gang behaviour and attitudes, working closely with convicted gang members and existing and potential gang members. This has the potential to prevent further gang involvement and to benefit gang members themselves. However, I would suggest that such work might also help to protect their potential victims, in particular the frail elderly and other vulnerable groups. Third sector organisations have long been involved in preventive work with vulnerable children, with health issues and with ageing. There is thus considerable preventive action already undertaken in the third sector at many levels, ideally providing valuable links between other levels and other areas of service. Sorry, I only had half a sentence left.
Minogue-Corps from Banbury Academy.
Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to talk to you about a charity that is very close with our school, Banbury Academy. The charity is called BIP, which stands for Banbury's Homeless Young People, who obviously provide care for the homeless who are young. However, they also support the older generations who also have no home. The main purpose is to provide food, drinks and a safe place to enjoy their lives even in the darkest of times. The homeless can be provided with a warm room with television, computers, art resources and musical instruments so their lives can immediately become more productive. But these people have been rejected from their families and loved ones, and the state fails to provide appropriately to their needs. The state may provide the basic needs, but do not help the homeless youth when it comes to rehabilitation. The state help the symptoms, but do not provide a cure. Thank you.
From Banbury Academy.
Lord Speaker, fellow students, members of the U3A, the point that I would like to raise is how religious groups work alongside the third sector to help provide care for the vulnerable in our society. To start with, I would like to mention some quotes from the Bible, which says, "Whoever closes his ear to the cry of the poor will himself call out and not be answered." From the Torah, which says, "Happy is he who performs a good deed, as he may tip the scales for himself and the rest of the world." From the glorious Quran, which says, "Show kindness to the parents, and to the kindred, and to the orphans, and to the needy, and to the neighbour who is a kin, and to the neighbour who is a stranger, and the wayfarer, and those who your right hand possesses." These selective few quotes, even though don't mention anything about the vulnerable, they imply that it is a duty for all religious groups to look after and care for them. Therefore, because it is inscribed in such compelling books, it means religious groups are volunteering in religious organisations voluntarily. And as you already know, everyone in the third sector wants to be there. And that's why we believe the care will be of a better quality. Lastly, I would like to mention that there are only certain problems and situations that only a religious group can help with. For example, if a Muslim woman had a problem with a debt, she would more likely want to seek advice from a fellow Islamic sister who knew about the Holy Scriptures and can guide and give advice through them. Thank you.
So we're moving excitingly towards a vote, but before doing that we are now going to have our summary speeches, a maximum of 3 minutes each, and let me call upon Martin McBride from Carterton U3A to sum up on the case for the third sector.
My Lord Speaker, fellow students and members of the U3A, the students of Westminster and Canterbury have made some persuasive arguments to support their relative cases. But none, I have to say, as strong as those you have heard, my fellow students of Banbury Academy. Let us take a moment to listen for the cries for help from the most vulnerable in our society. No, we cannot hear them from here. The state is too remote to respond. And many of the most vulnerable do not have a family, or their families have abandoned them. However, as we have heard from my colleagues today, the third sector, the charities and the religious organisations, are close enough to hear and respond to those cries for help. And they do it not just because it is a job, but because, like ourselves, we feel passionately in what we are doing, and they know they can make a difference to where it counts. My Lord Speaker, we need to treat the vulnerable people in our society, those in the dawn of life, those in the shadows, and those in the twilight, with dignity and respect. This need was strongly identified in the recent Care Quality Commission's report for the state of healthcare and adult social care in England 2011-2012. The speakers for the state have made strong evidence about the finances. And yes, the state is responsible for finances. This debate is about who's responsible, not just the finances. In fact, the speaker mentioned about the fuel allowance. Perhaps the Lords should denote part of their fuel allowance to keep the House of Lords warm in the winter. The family have argued that they should be the main one. But in our present society, there are so many broken families, so many families that are scattered around. It is difficult to say that the family should always be responsible. In conclusion, I would ask my ageing, note ageing, not aged, colleagues in U3A, who would they rather care for them in the twilight? An efficient but uncaring organisation who leaves a glass of water outside the reach, or the third sector of passionate and caring individuals. Please cast your vote for the third sector. You know it is the right thing to do.
This has been really an extremely good debate, and I thank you all. Not only have you expressed yourselves extremely eloquently, all of you on all sides, but you've also kept to the rules. You didn't chatter amongst yourselves, no one heckled, and as far as I can tell, no one went to sleep. So, I mean, well done you. Now, we move to a vote. There will be obviously 3 votes, and you can only vote once. And you raise your hands to do so. So I'm going to read out, the option that you've got, and then the doorkeepers will come and will count the number of people who've raised their hands for any particular option. So option number 1, the state should primarily be responsible for providing support to the vulnerable in our society. Hands up.
Right. Okay. It's happening, isn't it?
What?
It's happening.
It's happening.
Yes,
It's
yes.
happening.
It doesn't look like it's happening, but it's happening.
Oh, it's happening. They're voting from the gallery as well.
Okay.
How can you tell?
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, remember you can only vote once. Next option, the family should primarily be responsible for providing support to the vulnerable in our society. Hands up. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
The third option, the third sector should primarily be responsible for providing support to the vulnerable in our society. I think you can kind of guess the results. Never mind, we will still... So I'm going to use the words that I normally use when there is a division or a vote in the House of Lords when it's filled with members. And I say, my Lords, there have voted, and then I go on to the contents and discontents. In this case, we haven't got contents and discontents. We've got all contents, but in different proportions. So the third vote, which was for the third sector, had 21 votes. The second vote, which was for the family taking primary responsibility, had 41 votes, and the first vote, which was the state should take primary responsibility, is 138 votes. So, my Lords, so, my Lords, I declare that the state has it.